dreamt of this. This place of fear and fury. Do you hear it? The heartbeat of the lost ones. I can feel them on my skin. Each death, inked in blood. I won't stop fighting for them. Until the very last beat fades away. You want the truth? All the lives inside me tell me to let go. The shadow will always hang over me. What will I become?
Hey everyone, I'm Adam Orth. Welcome to the Game Maker's Notebook. Today we're coming to you from beautiful and unfortunately rainy Lake Como, Italy, where we are attending DICE Europe. And today our guest is Dom Matthews, studio head from the great Ninja Theory. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, I like the Great Ninja Theory. Maybe we'll rebrand to Ninja Theory the Great.
I mean,
thank you.
it wouldn't hurt anything. That's for sure. So I've got a lot of stuff to talk to you about today, a lot of Ninja Theory stuff, but also I want to talk about the really cool roundtable panel that you led yesterday. It's really good and timely topic. And I found a lot of what you said yesterday incredibly interesting. And it's been a topic of conversation amongst my friends here at the conference yesterday and last night. So, tell me a little bit about your kind of career journey through games. In the research that I've done, it's only two things.
Yeah.
You are one of those rare people who has more than a decade experience at a single place, which is Ninja Theory, where you've worked from, starting out as a communications manager, project manager, product development manager, commercial director, and now you're the studio head. So that's quite a path traveled through a studio and doing a lot of different things. How did that all start out for you?
When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I was the video game guy at school. There were people that were great at many things, but I was the video game guy. So always been a big game fan. And when I left school, went to university, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I studied economics at university, and was thinking about, do I want to pursue a career in something in video games or something in sports management? I wanted to be a football agent. So I landed on wanting to be a football agent actually. So I was like, okay, cool, that's what I'm going to do. I was at university in London, and when I graduated, I put my little suit on, and I'd found a list of sports agents in London, and I went and knocked on their doors, like a whole list. I just walked around London for like a week, like knocking on these doors, trying to get advice from anyone that would give me advice. And only one person spoke to me, and they said, I don't know what to tell you other than I got a job in marketing and PR, and that was my path. So I was like, cool, that's what I'm going to do. So I went and got a job in marketing and PR, not in games. And then with a plan that I'd get some experience, then maybe somehow that would end up with me getting into the sports industry. And then while I was there, I saw an advert for a role at Capcom. My favorite game at the time, and still is Resident Evil 4. And the advert had Leon on it from Resident Evil 4. And I was like, oh man, like what an incredible job that would be. I was not qualified. I didn't have the experience. And I kind of thought, well, there's no point in me applying for it. And then on the very last day, the deadline day, I thought, well, what have I got to lose? So I submitted my CV and got an interview. And even when I got an interview, I was like, wow, I'm going to get to go to the Capcom offices. This is incredible. It's like, cool. And then got the job, which was great. So I spent first part of my career at Capcom. First of all, working in the mobile game team, doing marketing and PR for Java games back in the day, Java versions of Phoenix Wright and Street Fighter 2, some amazing IP. Moved into the console team, and then when my wife and I decided to start a family, I decided that I didn't want to have the really long commute into work. I was commuting about 2.5-3 hours each way every day down to London from where I was near Cambridge. And I said, okay, well, I want to put family first, and I want to be around for the family when the baby arrives. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna leave. And it was just fortunate that Ninja Theory was there on the doorstep, and they were looking for someone in a communications role the first time they'd done that. So I joined Ninja Theory as a communications advisor back in 2010. Just after the studio, or just before the studio shipped Enslaved Odyssey to the West. And it just started working on DMC Devil May Cry, which of course was a Capcom title. So in my role at Capcom, I'd started to work on DMC as a product manager. And then I ended up moving across to Ninja Theory to work on the development side. And that was really, really interesting. I remember I got asked in my interview at Ninja Theory, about do I understand game development? Do I have good game development knowledge? And of course I said, yeah, of course. And then like literally within my first week, I wrote myself a Post-it note and I stuck it on my monitor, and it said like,
learn game development.
Yeah, it was like, I know nothing about game development, and game developers know very little about the publishing side. So I was like, great, there's a bridge there that I can build between those two things. So that's what I set about doing. I made it my business to really understand game development and game developers, and really worked hard to try and learn how to engage game developers in the publishing side of things. So that was the early part of my career there at Ninja Theory, was that, and learning, building on top of my publishing experience with learning about development. But I think really importantly as well, I think for my role now, was learning about why Ninja Theory is unique and what that DNA of the studio was and still is. And then, over the years, had more opportunities, got the opportunity to lead lead projects more sort of organizationally. And then I think things really changed on Hellblade 1. So we started working on Hellblade 1 in 2013, 2014, around that kind of time. And it was a time in the industry where we as a studio were struggling to find our new project. We'd shipped some good games. Enslaved was a good game. But
I mean, you guys have shipped some great games before then.
Yeah.
I mean, the list, when you look at the list, so I've been playing Ninja Theory games since day one. Kung Fu Chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, that game is a treasure.
Yeah.
It's a treasure. Heavenly Sword. Obviously, talked about Devil May Cry, Disney Infinity, some really interesting Star Wars VR, and obviously the Hellblade series. Those are all super high quality games, and I think you're just about to say why Ninja Theory is special, but from a player of Ninja Theory games, they're all really unique in that you can see the Ninja Theory kind of DNA and connective tissue through the games. I see it anyway.
Yeah.
So what is that? What is the DNA of Ninja Theory, and does that DNA that you're working with today, is that still the same thing that got Kung Fu Chaos out into the world? Heavenly Sword seems like you can make a case that that's a type of game that could have evolved into the Hellblade series. These are just my opinions, though.
Yeah.
You can tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Yeah, no, I think you are right. I think we have a belief as a studio that games as an interactive art form and interactive medium are so well positioned to immerse people in impactful stories. People talk about how film and literature and music moves them, has an impact on their life, makes them reflect, makes them think differently about themselves, about the world. And I think games can do that, but I think it's difficult. And I think that there are pressures that at times in the industry prevent that from being the North Star. But that is for us. Our mission as a studio that we think about is we want to craft life-changing art with game-changing tech, which sounds super lofty, right?
I mean, you can say that, but the Hellblade series is an exact example of that.
Yeah. So something I really loved about Enslaved, and this was when I was in the early days of my career at Ninja Theory, was that there was a magic there that people really, really cared about those characters like they were real people. And that stuck in my mind. It's like, how do we achieve that magic? So that's what we strive to do, is to create characters that and stories that have an impact on people. Like the best movies, like when you go to the cinema and you see a movie and someone says, oh, like, what would you give it out of 10? And it's one of those movies where you say, it's not about that.
Yeah.
Like, give me a minute because I need to think about this. And I don't think games get the respect for their ability to do that. And so that's what drives us, is like, can we move people? Can we have an impact on people? Can we make a really compelling experience? And my belief is that if you can make something that is truly compelling, that people can connect to in a meaningful way, then with the right thinking, the right decision making, you can turn that into something that is commercially successful too. So that's how I think about it. That's how we think about it. It's how do we make something special? And Hellblade, we're very, very lucky that we hit on that. A game that people really, really connected with, and by far the most valuable thing that for me in my career was the feedback from Hellblade, was people telling us what it had done for them, how it had given them a platform on which to talk about their mental health difficulties. Yeah. I had a journalist at the time who sent me an email after Hellblade 1 and said, I'm going to tell you something that I've never told anyone before, not even my wife. And he told me about his experiences with mental health difficulties. And he was telling me because he trusted me. He'd never met me before, never spoke to me before, but he trusted me because of that game that we had made. That's hugely rewarding. But I think there's an important point there as well, that we're not just about making games to send out messages or to help people or to surface topics. Games have to be compelling,
Yeah, but you could argue that one of the reasons that Hellblade, for example, is compelling is because of that, part of that is that element. Yeah. And, I'm a firm believer in, excuse me, of if you have a platform like being able to make a video game to, without, I think when it's overt, it loses the point. But if you craft a story or characters that, it's in that, and you take that out and you're able to say something about that without, holding up a sign.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's a Trojan horse is how I think about it.
Yes, right? That's a great way to say it.
And people have asked me like, oh, we want to go and do something like Hellblade. And this is often from sort of academic institutes or different organizations, even charities. They're like, we want to do something that's going to teach people about this subject. And we're going to make a game. It's like, cool, but you go and make a game that's called like, learn about this thing. Like no one's going to play that.
No.
You need to make a compelling game that is true to that subject. And then a byproduct of that is that some people will take some learnings from it. Like we have people who play Hellblade that don't even know that it's about a character who experiences psychosis.
Yeah.
It doesn't even register with them, through to people who have said, my friends and family understand me for the first time because of this game.
Interesting.
But I think the Trojan horse, the vehicle for it, has to be a really compelling experience and journey. Otherwise, you've got nothing to deliver that.
Yeah, it's like
story on.
Then it's the same thing as someone like handing you a pamphlet at a hospital or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like nobody wants that.
Yeah.
Right.
And film's been doing it forever. Right.
Books.
Yeah.
TV. Everyone's doing it. Why can't games? Games should do it.
And I think film now is almost, I think, more powerful than ever because it's so rare in modern day society that you have a captive audience.
Yeah.
You go to the cinema, the movie theater, and you were there for 2 hours and you have to be immersed in it because you can't be sitting there looking at your phone or doing other things. And I think,
I don't know, have you been to the cinema in America?
Not recently.
Like yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's a lot of phones.
Really?
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah.
But you have to go on like a Tuesday morning at like 10 a.m.
I notice it with my kids though. When I take them to see a film, they'll be like, "Oh my god, that was amazing! That was incredible!" And
it's still alive. There's still hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. So yeah, I think that's what we were about. And then, we're about that mission, and then everything we do feeds into that. We have a big focus on how do we deliver believability. We have a big focus on things like facial animation and use of performance capture, and something that we added to
arguably a leader in that area in the game industry.
Yeah, and we've been working with those technologies for a long time, but I think the important thing is that we don't do that to be a leader. We don't do that to be able to say, hey, we're at the cutting edge. We do that in the pursuit of allowing people to suspend their disbelief as easily as possible, because that is then when you can immerse people and then you can take them on that journey. So our team will talk about the minute detail of facial animation and the blood flow that you can see through the transparency of an ear. And I think a lot of people might say, well, why does that stuff matter? But it matters, I think, at a subconscious level, because if you believe that's a real person in a real world, then you're not thinking about how good the video game is. You're thinking about
how cool the ear is.
Yeah. And actually, there was a really interesting meme going around with Hellblade 2 comparing ears, like who's got the best next gen ear.
Yeah.
But it's in the pursuit of allowing people to believe in it, because then if they believe, you can take them on that journey, you can tell them that story, and then you have a chance of making an impact. So the technology and the innovation is there to serve the purpose of the creative and the immersion and the believability, which I think is slightly different from realism. I think sometimes people think believable means fully grounded and you can't have anything fantastical. But believable is you can make a giant monster, but you want to be able to believe in it.
Yeah, don't tell that to James Cameron. If you use Avatar as an example, totally believable.
Yeah.
Right? Technical excellence.
Yeah.
Right? That's a real interesting kind of cross with what you're talking about, because when you I will disclose that I haven't played Hellblade 2 yet, but only because I know for sure I'm going to be playing it in the next month or two as part of the awards.
Well, that's
that will for sure be in the narrative panel, which I'm a part of.
Well, that's great. Thank you. That's nice.
The first one is like probably a high watermark for me. One of the most immersive games I've ever played. I did play it completely with headphones, and I did play it in almost a single sitting. And it was extremely powerful because the character is so I don't even want to say believable, and I don't even want to say relatable. I was just completely sucked in to the character and what was happening, which I'm sure you've heard a billion times, but that's like, in my opinion, probably the most important calling card for that game, because it's when you have a great character in a video game, it really stands out, and that character is probably, Hall of Famer. Like, it's really, really good. And also, while playing that game as a developer, is just completely jealous of everything that's happening and the high quality and the length of the game.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about that because, we are in quite a disruptive time in the industry in terms of like what people want to play. And there's no answer, because there's tons of different people who want to play different things. But there's a sentiment about all these big, never-ending live service games like it's a job, right? And there's also a sentiment of, a large segment of people who play games are adults with families and responsibilities, time to play games. And when I when I look at Hellblade, I've played it through a couple times just because it's wonderful. And when I look at that, I feel like I'm playing like a blockbuster film, right? And I like when you end it, you can just walk away from that and just have like an amazing experience, like just like when you go see a good film, right? And crafting a game at that technical level and having the restraint to keep it at 6 hours or something like that. Like that's, in my opinion, the holy grail of games, because I think very soon, and I mean, not very soon, it's happening now, that people are demanding that.
Yeah.
Right. People want shorter, really impactful single player games that when you're done, you're done. Right. Of course, you can play it again and again. But, you know, there's like movies that have impacted me in my life that I've only watched once because it was such an experience in the theater. Right. There Will Be Blood. I've only seen that movie once, but it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. And I don't want to see it again. Right. I don't want to change that experience. So do you guys think about the games like that and like having like an impact the first time you play it and being able to just walk away?
Yeah. So yes, we do. We do. I think we start with the story that we want to tell and the journey that we want to take the player on. And the game is the right length for telling that story. And this started on Hellblade 1, which is where the studio found itself in a place where the industry at the time was, AAA was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was, at the time, it was companion apps and DLC and pre-order DLC and all these things. And then you had the mobile space was really taking off. And we found ourselves in a place that was like, well, there's people that love our kind of games. We love making them. How do we build a model that allows us to carry on making these games? And that's kind of where we came up with what we called independent AAA at the time, which was this idea that you can make games that take creative risks, that have AAA type production values, can be the length that they need to be, and as a result of digital distribution, can be priced at the appropriate price. And that was a big change because at the time it was, you make a game, you have to charge $60. So I think digital distribution has now allowed you to make a game that is $1, $70 and everything in between, depending on the length of it. So yeah, I think the industry is so diverse now in terms of the types of games that there are out there. And there's always an strange assumption in games that everyone's trying to make games for everyone. Which is so different from music.
Yeah. It's different from everything.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anywhere else. So
we're in an industry where everything is either the worst or the best. And
it's super fun to be, making games and you have to settle for worst or best.
Yeah. It's the worst or the best. And the assumption is you're trying to make your game for everyone, and we're not.
Yeah.
And I think about when I started my career, there was this kind of belief that gamers were, the types of games that we make, it's 18 to 34. It's this 18 to 34-year-old demographic that you're making your game for. And at 34, people stop playing games and start doing
no interest.
Yeah. It's other, jigsaw puzzles or whatever, right?
Knitting.
Yeah. And that's just not the case, right? So as gamers have grown up, I think to your point, there's people who have less time, and this is the case for me. I don't have time to put 100 hours into the game the types of games that I personally love are games that I can complete in, let's call it sub 10 hours, because I can get that entire experience. So I think there's a fascination with game length, which you don't see in other things. Again, books, go, oh, hey, this is a great book. Yeah, well, how long is it? Oh, it's 200 pages. I don't read anything under 600 pages. Yeah. How long is that movie? Oh, 2 hours. Yeah, I only watch movies that are 3.5 hours long.
Yeah.
So, our belief is that you make the right size game for the experience and story that you want to tell. And I think there's space for that in the market.
Totally agree.
I think the other important element of this as well is that as an industry, we have to protect creative risk-taking. We have to avoid that being squeezed out of the equation, because that's really important.
Well, you can see what happened to the music industry and the movie industry, and it's now happening to the game industry, which is, consolidation.
Yeah, and as the pressure increases, the appetite for creative risk-taking reduces.
Yeah.
So you need to have a framework and a model that allows you to take those risks. And you need to be smart. You need to think about your audience and the right scope and scale of what you're doing. But I think it's about focus as well. People often say to me, we would love for our characters to look as good as your characters, or we'd love for our environments to look as good as your environments. But, we don't have hundreds of characters in our games.
That's one thing. And also, most people just always kind of discount, it took us 15 years to get to that character.
Yeah.
You can't just.
Yeah, and it's what we care about, right? That's the priority for us, right? Our priority as a studio is how do we make these characters that you can believe in and build that relationship with all those things I've talked about. That isn't the focus for other studios, and that's fine, and that's great. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, because that isn't. That's really the beauty of the industry.
Yeah.
So someone else's focus is not that. It's actually about scale, and it's about a world where you can go and talk to 100 different characters, and that's great. But they're not going to be able to. They can't focus then on the transparency of the earlobe. Right? We can, because we're delivering a small cast of characters, because we're focused on that immersive journey for the people that want that. And I think in the industry, that's almost starting to be seen as bold. To do that. But I think it's just recognition that everyone is making the games that they want to make for the audiences they want to make it for. And we're not all trying to be everything to everyone.
Yeah, our industry is technically driven, right? So there's a fair amount of let's show this cool thing. And the studios that do that the most successfully are the ones that are able to merge the latest technology breakthrough into an experience, like you said earlier, where you're not even paying attention to how cool it is technically, right?
Yeah, and the pace at which technology is moving on now, you're seeing games made by one person teams that can look incredible. So for a studio like us to stay ahead of the game, it has to be about the execution.
Yeah. So going back to when you said, making games for everyone, right? You said you're not doing that. Obviously, you're not doing that. So who are you making your games for?
I think we're making games for people who love the same things that we do, which is people who love story and being taken on a immersive journey and experience in only a way that a game can. Games have that unique attribute that when it comes to character, you can embody a character. You can make decisions as that character versus linear media where you are a spectator.
Yeah.
So I think our fans are people who love that about games, want to sink into a world and escape to a different place for a short while.
Yeah, so it's almost excuse me. It's almost like a record label, right? Where you know who's buying the records of the type of bands that are signed to this label, and that's a very particular fan with a type of taste and a very kind of specific idea of what music they want to listen to.
Yeah, and it's an interesting analogy because actually I often think of Xbox as being like a record label in a way, and then actually the studios being bands. So, and the strength of that is in that kind of diversity. We are very different to Tim Schafer's studio, to Double Fine. They're like a separate band for a separate audience. And then when you combine those two together and with all of the other studios, then you're covering a lot of people. But we all have our kind of specific areas of focus, things that we care about, things that are important to us and important to our players. And then when you kind of line all those people up, it's like a record label, or it's like a sports team. We're all playing a different role within that team because we have our speciality and our unique attributes. But then when you combine them, you are hitting a broad audience, but you're not all trying to hit everyone, but you are together.
Yeah. So speaking of Microsoft, you guys were acquired by Microsoft in 2018.
Yeah,
2018. And Hellblade II is kind of like the first game that kind of went through the Microsoft machine. How was that?
Great. When we were acquired, Phil Spencer and Matt Booty, they said, "We love Ninja Theory. We want to empower you to go and do your thing." And that's exactly what they've done. We get to go and focus on the things that we care about, or the things that I've talked about, but we sit within this kind of support ecosystem of experience and expertise that we can lean on when we need it. And for me as a studio head, I get to sit in calls and go to events where I'm surrounded by the likes of Tim Schafer and Brian Fargo and Todd Howard now, and these types of people, which I can learn so much from these people. So I honestly think that being within Xbox Game Studios is the best place for Ninja Theory, because of our focus, because of our commitment to go and push the craft in pursuit of that journey that has a really high level of respect within Xbox, and we are encouraged and empowered to go and pursue that.
So you led a roundtable here at the conference yesterday, and I want to talk a bit about that. I'm gonna read the synopsis of it just so our listeners can get the best understanding. So it's titled "Powering Continuous Improvement in Your Teams," and you moderated discussion on best practices in cultivating continuous improvement in your teams. This includes creating an environment that welcomes feedback and allows teams to eradicate blind spots and focus their personal development efforts where they will reap the most value. We talked about cultivating team dynamics and transparency, building mindsets and skill sets as an individual, team, in the studio, and deploying high impact feedback instruments. And it was a really fascinating talk. And I want to dive back into that with you, because a lot of the things that you said in the roundtable were super interesting to me. Very forward-thinking stuff that really, I'm going to be thinking about for a little while. So you've moved into the studio head role for what, 4 or 5 years now, I guess.
Yeah.
And you're pretty open in the roundtable about all of the stuff that maybe you didn't feel was working in the studio, and things you wanted to change, or things that had to change, or maybe things should change. And we had a long discussion about feedback, and I was thinking maybe we could talk a little bit about that again, because some of the stuff that you were saying was really unique and interesting and fresh, but also completely common sense based. And we've all been on different teams and tried different things, and there's no right or wrong answer, except for the fact that you do have to give feedback and you do have to be transparent with your team. And I think if you don't focus on those two things specifically in your team and development environment, obviously a lot of things can go wrong. So walk me through a little bit about some of the things that you've tried that we talked about, and and impart your wisdom onto our listeners, because it was some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think at the heart of our game development is iteration. We make something and then we look at how we can improve it, and we improve it over time, and we continue that cycle. It's a cycle of improvement, and we've always done that with our games. And really, what we've tried to do is do the same thing with our team, with our teams individually and collectively. And as with the game, it relies on candid feedback. You have to try and create a culture of feedback, and that is both giving feedback, but also having the ability to receive feedback as well. So I think the destination that we're trying to get to is that it's the norm, that there's a flow of communication, that we're all open to feedback. We have the confidence to be vulnerable in receiving feedback, but we also feel very comfortable in giving that feedback. So some of the things that we do, I've just completed a 360 review of myself. So I have 12 people that have given feedback on me, strengths and areas for development. And that's really fantastic. It allows me to identify some blind spots that I can work on. And then I share that with as many people in the team as possible. Because I want to show that I don't think I'm perfect, and I have iteration to do on me as a leader. And I think everyone has that. So we have a mentoring structure in the studio, so that everyone has a mentor that they can go to. And the idea there is that there's a good flow of feedback. We have that structured with a quarterly approach to peer reviews, peer feedback. But it's by no means perfect, because people find it very difficult to give candid feedback, partly because of the fear of the reaction.
Yeah.
So the idea really is that you just create a culture where it becomes the norm, and people can be open to it. But I think one of the things that I think is critical to this, and I think it's particularly true when you're talking about feedback in the context of decision making, is that you always have real clarity over who the decision maker is and how that decision is going to be made.
Yeah, one of the interesting things I learned about your studio yesterday was, for example, that you have a group of creative directors instead of a single creative director, and there's got to be a real interesting decision dynamic that comes out of that group. Like, it's 4 people, obviously all working towards the same thing, but you describe the backgrounds of where these people came from, and they're very different, and probably not that traditional from what most creative directors in the industry come from design.
Yeah.
Most of them, not all, but the majority, I think, are, they come from that kind of design track, and it's always really interesting to see non-designers in that role. So, talk a little bit about the decision making and how feedback from the team works into that, and maybe what we were talking about with getting feedback but not necessarily acting on it.
Yeah. So we have 4 people who are our core kind of creative leadership group. David, who's our audio director, Dan, who's our environment art director, and Mark, our VFX director, and Rogerio, who's our design director. Who work as a group. And one of the benefits that we have is that in our leadership group within the studio, the average tenure at the studio is 14 and a half years. So
average.
Yeah. So it's a team that have worked together for a long time, shipped a lot of games together, know each other really, really well. So that certainly makes things easier because you're starting on a foundation of alignment.
It's very rare.
Yeah, it is very rare. So you already have that kind of understanding of the DNA of the studio, of the IP, and you just know each other inside and out, right? So you have a level of comfort there. I think where it comes to feedback, and I think it's best for me to talk about like how I try and handle this is I try to build a structure around being curious and being inquisitive. As a studio head, part of my job is to be a decision maker. That's part of the role. But I approach these things in a way where I challenge my perception by trying to get as much data and information as possible on something, but within the context, the clarity of how the decision is going to be made. So on occasion, I will say, here's a thing that we need to decide. I'm going to make the decision on this, but I want to take your input and your feedback on that, and then I'm going to go and decide. Sometimes it will be, actually, no, I have all the information I want. I don't want your feedback on this. I'm going to go and make a decision. And the hope with that, and I think we achieve that in places, is that for the decision maker, it doesn't become about who's gonna win out.
Yeah.
There's clarity on who's going to make that decision, and it's about exploring the topic so that you can make the most informed decision that you possibly can. And so, I think for me, then it becomes a more positive process. And I found that people, when they understand the decision-making process and what it's going to be based on, they will play their role in that and actually are more comfortable when you don't go in the direction that they wanted.
Mm, interesting. That's interesting. How do you see, this kind of culture of feedback that you're cultivating? How does that manifest itself into the software?
Well, I think two ways really. One is the iteration that it allows in the game. We have a team that are committed to the quality of the experience. We're very proud, and I think we did a good job, in particular on Hellblade II, of delivering a game that was very solid. Ran very smoothly, really free of bugs, like very solid. And that's because you have a group of people that are have got each other's backs in terms of, hey, seen this thing, like maybe we should do something about that. So everyone's kind of giving that feedback and providing a safety net, really, through that feedback, that we're going to catch everything, because everyone's keeping an eye out for those things and for each other. So if you can create that kind of comfort and giving that, as a leader, the thing that I worry about is the things that I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it's very easy to think I know everything that's happening in my studio. And I kind of work on the basis that I probably know 10%. Because there's conversations and things that happen behind closed doors that I just don't know about, right?
Yeah.
So I have to work hard to try and find these things. And the more that people can feel comfortable in giving that feedback and it becomes regular, that there aren't things stewing away in people's minds or behind closed doors. It's out in the open, and then once it's out in the open, you can deal with it. You can find a solution.
Do you feel like it's 100% at your studio? Because there's some people who just don't want to give feedback.
No, it's far from 100% at the studio. It's an ambition. I think we're getting there, but it's a cultural shift.
Yeah.
People, and you have to be clear on, you have to encourage people to think about feedback as being only positive.
Yeah.
This is the way that we improve, and actually not giving feedback is a disservice to the studio, to the individual.
Right. It's not like, you did a shit job on lighting last week.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, of course. Right. And it's also not saying that everyone's feedback has to be taken into consideration, or everyone's feedback feeds into the decision, because I think that is a path to compromise. That's not it. And I think that's where that structure of, here's how we're going to make the decision, but let's get the different perspectives on this to help us make an informed decision. It's not a culture of everyone gets to decide. We're designing by committee, or we're deciding by committee. It's not that, because
that's truly the death of a game. As soon as you start doing that, it's over.
Sure, exactly right. It's not that, but it's creating a structure where you can still get the benefit of the different perspectives, but you can have the clarity of the decision making. Yeah,
because there are also, like we talked about yesterday, there are also, examples of there's too many people making decisions, or nobody's making decisions, right? And I think it's pretty well proven that people feel comfortable when there's a clear decision maker. Maybe not at the top, or in their discipline, or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Having the person or the group who is the clear decision maker on things is absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely. It is absolutely critical. And a lot of people want that. They want to know, cool, what do you want me to do? And what are we trying to achieve here? You have to have that structure. And I think it's not talked about enough. okay, here's how we're going to make this decision. This is this is how we're going to do it. I had one recently where it was a decision talking about kind of some internal structure stuff. And it was like, okay, I'm going to make the decision on this, but let's have lunch. Anyone who wants to come and has got a take on it, let's come and have lunch. And I sat there and listened to people for an hour. And then I went away and, didn't do what they'd suggested. But, but I think...
But you had the lunch.
Yeah. But
I mean, I'm a firm believer that a lunch can solve almost any problem. Or at least open the door to figuring it out. As a leader or a manager, I've taken so many people to lunch, and it's almost always like, I just don't feel like I'm being heard. That's why I'm grumpy.
Yeah.
And
I think I've tried to and continue to kind of condition myself to be investigative with these things, right? When someone says, I think we should do this, it's so interesting to dig down and to find out what is at the heart of that thing.
Yeah, because it's never
it's not
on the surface.
It's just, it's not that you think it has to be blue. At the heart of this is that you thought that we were going for, this place was supposed to have like a cool tone to it.
Yeah.
So it's not about it being blue at all. It's about, you thought it was about, and then you can deal with that rather than red or blue discussion.
Right.
But that takes, I think as humans, we're so predisposed to kind of defend our position. And that can be wrapped up in career progression and many other things. And it's like it takes for someone in the room to be open-minded that they might be wrong, and to take that curious approach to trying to dig into the heart of something, and learn. But this is taking training, right? And this isn't, I've worked with a leadership coach who works with a lot of people at Xbox for a while, and I've had to try and condition myself to be like this, to try and. But I believe that. I believe that only good can come from this kind of culture, in that, like, I don't worry about whether people in my studio are working hard. I worry about whether they're working too hard. That's something that I worry about. But I know that people are working hard to make the best games that they possibly can. And then you can have a culture of high trust. You have a culture of high trust. I trust that people are doing the very best that they can for the studio. So I don't have to worry about those things. I can focus on my role being, how do I support that iteration? How do I support us to be the best that we can be, rather than lacking trust? To me, it's happy people are going to be productive people, and
it seems simple.
Yeah, but I think they're going to be loyal. They're going to be productive. And when I say happy people, I don't mean like, I want to work for 5 minutes and then take the next 30 minutes off. It's not those things, but people that are engaged in the mission.
Yeah,
in the product, in the game, and in each other. That's one of the things that I see as a challenge of remote working now is. I think people are loyal to their colleagues more than they are to organizations.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think when there's pure remote work, how do you build those bonds with other people?
Are you guys remote or hybrid?
We're hybrid, yeah. And we're kind of free flow hybrid, I suppose. So I allow people to work in the studio or work at home, whatever is in the best interests of the project and the studio, right? And it works. We have about maybe half of our team in the studio on any given day. Vast majority of people are spending time in the studio because they recognize the value of bringing them their full selves. And sharing that with people. which I think is a really important part of particularly game development. And increasingly, my belief is that you have to have in-person time.
Yeah, I kind of waffle back and forth on it because I do believe in the in-person thing. Like, you just, no Zoom meeting is ever gonna have the energy or the spark of 5 people jumping in a conference room real quick and like jamming on an idea. Like, it's just never gonna happen on a Zoom call. But driving 2.5 hours each way to work,
sure,
sucks.
Yeah, but I actually think it's about, I think the big thing you miss is not the meetings. It's the little bit after or before the meeting where you get the human cues,
the camaraderie of the whole thing.
Yeah, but it's also there's just human cues that show up on the little joke, just the good morning, how was your weekend? They serve a purpose of saying, hey, we're good and we're aligned. And then you can have the conversation, the meeting, the discussion on that basis. I think when you don't have that, it becomes strictly business and strictly the thing, or strictly the sort of decision making or trying to figure out the problem. But you don't have that kind of unsaid, subconscious foundation of we're good.
Yeah,
that's so hard to get.
Comfort of just being in the same space with someone that you're working with, and that does matter.
Yeah,
there are plenty of examples of great games now that have been made fully remote.
Yeah,
I don't really think there's a right or wrong. It's what works for
studios and works for teams, right? And I think that's at the heart, is what you're trying to achieve and what's the best way to achieve it.
But I do think a big benefit of work from home and the hybrid stuff that we didn't have before is that it feels like teams and studios are more than ever really caring about the health and well-being of their team. Not that it wasn't happening before, but before the pandemic and all the remote work, mostly things were just kind of done the same way for a very long time. And the shift that's happened in the game industry and the way we make games and the way we work has completely changed. And, I think that I'm a firm believer in, you hire someone not to tell them what to do. You hire them because they bring their own magic to the stew. That ingredient is really important. And I think that, with a hybrid model, for example, allowing people to be at home a couple days or whatever, I don't know what the rules are at your studio, but if, you manage, however, who manages it, the employee or the, the team or whatever, but like giving them that extra agency of their life. I have seen a benefit of that in my work and people I work with, where it's like, I'm trusted. I'm an adult. I can take care of my own schedule. I don't need to, physically be here every second of the day, but if I want to, I can.
Yeah.
And I think that's a net positive for the entire industry.
Yeah, I agree. For me personally now, I get to take my kids to school every morning, which is incredible.
It's incredible.
And that means a lot to me. But it's how I think about my team. You're right. I think if you can have a high trust environment and culture where that everyone's going to act in the best interests of a project, then you can afford to say, hey, it's up to you.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
But if you don't trust your people, it doesn't matter where they're working from.
Yeah.
Right. Because
yeah.
you're not going to be making a good game.
Yeah.
You're not going to have good culture at your studio, and you're probably not going to hold on to talent.
Yeah.
Because you have to, game developers are special creatures, and everyone has their own needs. I guess that's not much different than any other kind of work outside of games or whatever. But there's really like a lot of individualism in game teams that is what makes it so fun and unique and interesting, and how these things get born. And I just think, it sucks that we had the pandemic, but that kind of change that we're talking about right now is, just think, a massive, important shift in the industry and the way we work.
Yeah.
One last thing I wanted to ask you is, probably can't talk about what you guys are doing next, but I'm sure it's going to be amazing. Is there anything you can say about it?
No, there isn't. But what I can say is that we shipped Hellblade 2, and everyone took a break. I took a break, went on a family holiday, and it was great. And on returning to the studio, and we have the whole team back together, the buzz and the energy in the studio is incredible. I absolutely love it. The enthusiasm for going again. Building momentum is really hard. Losing it is so easy. And once you've shipped the game, I think it's very difficult to try and continue that momentum. So I'm really grateful for the vibe we have in the studio. People are like, let's go. And so that's great. So yeah, whatever we do next, we're chomping at the bit to get back into it, and we're quickly hitting the ground running, and off we go. So lots of work to do, as there always is, but we're excited about what we do next in the future of the studio.
Do you? I'm sure being part of Xbox and Microsoft affords you the ability to maybe explore some stuff, and not, maybe not the crushing pressure of, being independent and making a game, and also figuring out what the next thing is in the middle of making that game. That's a real hard thing. So I'm sure it's a huge benefit to you guys, and being able to do some searching and experiment, with the formula and the vision that is Ninja Theory. And I'm sure, like myself and many people listening to this, we can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on the podcast. It means a lot to me.
That was fun.